It was one of those Friday nights that start harmlessly. Too much laughter, too many glasses clinking, and that false sense of ease that comes with good wine. Michael and I were at his old friend Tom's dinner party, surrounded by people who talked too loudly and laughed at all the wrong moments. I sat there, smiling when I should, nodding when someone caught my eye, playing the familiar role of the polite wife. Michael, as always, was in his element, charming, funny, louder than he needed to be. The kind of man everyone loves at a table, except maybe his wife. I kept watching him, the way he gestured with his glass, how his words slurred just slightly, enough to make me wonder if the whiskey was the only thing making him bold. There was something strange about the way he looked at Tom, almost nervous beneath the laughter. It was subtle, but after years together, I'd learned to read the smallest cracks. My gut whispered that something wasn't right, but I brushed it off. After all, I'd been trained to ignore those whispers. When Michael got up to take a phone call, Tom leaned toward me. His breath smelled like bourbon and bad decisions. "You're lucky, Laura," he said with a grin that was both playful and reckless. "Not every woman's husband gets them a second home." I laughed politely, pretending I didn't hear what I thought I heard. "Second home?" I asked, keeping my tone light. Tom chuckled, raising his glass. "You know, the apartment. I helped him move the couch there last month." For a second, I couldn't tell if the room had gone silent or if my ears had stopped working. My smile stayed frozen, but something inside me cracked open. "What apartment are you talking about?" I asked softly, keeping my voice calm, almost curious, like this was just small talk. Tom's face shifted, realization washing over him like a wave. "Oh, crap," he muttered, scratching the back of his neck. "Forget I said anything, all right? Just don't tell him I told you." I laughed lightly, the kind of laugh that covers 1,000 emotions at once: shock, confusion, maybe even fear. The sound of it felt foreign to my own ears. Inside, my pulse was a hammer. I replayed his words over and over, every syllable twisting tighter around my chest. The apartment. It echoed like a secret I wasn't meant to hear, something that had been sitting right behind me all along. And then, Michael came back, smiling, charming, utterly unaware. He sat down beside me and brushed his hand against mine. "What's going on here?" he asked playfully. I swallowed the truth whole and forced a smile. "Nothing," I said softly. "Just catching up." He grinned, clinking his glass against mine, and the laughter around the table returned. But inside, the world had shifted, small, quiet, and irreversible. The rest of the night blurred into background noise, people talking, music playing, glasses refilling. I nodded through every joke and story, but I wasn't really there. My mind kept circling that one phrase like a hawk: the apartment. I pictured him carrying boxes, arranging furniture, laughing in some space that wasn't ours. Every late night at the office suddenly felt like a line rehearsed too perfectly. Every business trip became a puzzle piece falling into place. I excused myself to the bathroom just to breathe. The mirror caught me. Same face, same dress, but something in my eyes had changed. I wasn't angry yet. Anger comes later, after disbelief has burned away. What I felt was smaller, colder, like the quiet before a storm. I fixed my lipstick, walked back out, and took my seat beside him again. He smiled. I smiled back, and as the night went on, I laughed when I had to, pretending everything was fine. But deep down, something new had been born. Something that didn't belong to love anymore. Something sharper. I didn't know it yet, but that drunken confession wasn't just a slip of the tongue. It was the beginning of the end, and the start of something much darker. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tom's grin, heard his words replaying like a broken record. The apartment. Morning sunlight crept through the curtains, too bright, too intrusive for the storm inside me. Michael was still asleep beside me, breathing steadily, like a man with nothing to hide. I watched him for a while, studying the calm in his face, wondering how many lies could fit behind that kind of peace. When I finally got up, my hands were trembling. I made coffee I couldn't taste and scrolled through my phone like a detective in disguise. Every part of me screamed not to look, because once you start searching, you can't unsee what you find. But curiosity mixed with fear is a dangerous fuel. I opened his messages first. Everything looked too perfect, too empty. Not a trace of real life, no random texts, no old jokes, no mess. It was spotless, and that's when I knew. You don't need evidence when your gut already knows the truth. Still, I needed something solid, something that could breathe outside my own mind. I waited until I heard the shower running before reaching for his phone again, this time opening the banking app. It was a move I'd never imagined myself making, the kind of thing you judge other women for doing, until the silence in your home makes you desperate. I scanned through our joint account, line by line, my pulse keeping time with the numbers, groceries, gas, bills, everything normal until one recurring transfer caught my eye. Wellington Management. The name meant nothing to me, but the steady withdrawals did. Same amount, same day, every month. My stomach dropped. I didn't need to be a detective to recognize a rent payment when I saw one. The sound of running water filled the silence. I typed the name into my phone with shaking fingers, half hoping it would lead to nothing. But the search results told a different story, a sleek apartment complex downtown, all glass and marble. I felt my breath hitch. Of course it's downtown. Close enough for convenience, far enough for secrets. I copied the number, hesitated, then hit call before fear could stop me. Wellington Apartments, how may I help you? A cheerful voice answered. I almost hung up, but something in me, maybe pride, maybe rage, pushed forward. Hi, I said, steadying my tone. I'd like to confirm a lease under the name Michael Turner. The receptionist paused. One moment, please. Those seconds stretched like an eternity. Then, yes, Mr. Turner rents Unit 204. I thanked her, hung up, and sat there in silence, staring at nothing. The mug in my hand had gone cold, my reflection trembling in the coffee's surface. For a long moment, I didn't move. I just listened to the water running upstairs, imagining him humming, completely unaware that the walls around his lies had just cracked. I could almost hear the sound of something inside me snapping too. Quiet, but final. It wasn't shock anymore. Shock is what you feel when the ground first gives way. This was anger, steady and focused, like fire learning to walk. I thought about every time he'd said, "You worry too much," or "You're imagining things." Gaslight after gaslight, until I started believing I was the problem. And now here I was, holding proof that I'd been right all along. When he came downstairs minutes later, smiling, towel around his shoulders, I smiled too. I poured him coffee, kissed his cheek, and asked how he'd slept. He had no idea the air in the room had changed. I'd stopped being the wife that morning. I'd become the investigator, and what I planned to uncover next would change everything. The next morning, I woke up with one thought pulsing in my mind: Unit 204. I told Michael I had errands to run and watched him leave first, his usual kiss on my cheek suddenly feeling foreign, rehearsed. The moment his car disappeared down the street, I grabbed my purse, my keys, and that piece of paper with the address, the one that had kept me awake all night. The drive across town felt longer than it should have, each red light mocking me with time to think. My hands gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. When I pulled up to the building, I understood instantly. It was nothing like our house, sleek, modern, the kind of place people move into when they want to start a new life. My stomach twisted. He hadn't just cheated, he'd built an entire stage for it. I sat there for a moment, watching people come and go through the glass doors, wondering how many of them knew my husband, how many had seen him laugh in the elevator or bring flowers through the lobby. I waited until a tenant walked in and slipped quietly behind her, my pulse pounding in my throat. Every step echoed in that pristine hallway, sterile and silent, like it was daring me to turn back. The smell of fresh paint mixed with expensive perfume made my stomach churn. I found Unit 204, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might give me away. I stood there for a second, hand hovering over the doorknob, whispering to myself, "If this is what I think it is, God help him." The door was unlocked. I pushed it open slowly, and the world I knew ended in that instant. The air inside was heavy with something floral, not my perfume, not my scent. 2 wine glasses sat on the counter, one still half full. A silk robe was draped lazily across the couch like a signature left behind, and on the wall, framed photos, Michael and another woman, smiling as if they'd built this life together. My knees almost buckled. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I touched the counter just to feel something real, something that would remind me I wasn't dreaming. The silence in the room mocked me, thick and intimate. Every detail screamed betrayal, her handwriting on a note by the fridge, his favorite whiskey on the shelf. He'd recreated us here, only without me. My chest ached with something between heartbreak and fury. I didn't cry, not yet. And then I heard it, soft footsteps from the bedroom. I turned, and there she was. A young woman, wearing one of Michael's shirts, her hair messy from sleep. When she saw me, she froze, eyes wide, mouth open like she'd seen a ghost. "Who are you?" she stammered. I took a breath, steady, cold, final. His wife. The color drained from her face. She stepped back, her lips trembling, words failing her completely. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just looked at her, really looked, and saw everything Michael had traded me for. Youth, novelty, the illusion of passion. I almost pitied her. Almost. Because one day she'd learn the same truth I had. Men like him never stay loyal to anyone. They just move their lives from one address to another. I turned and walked out, closing the door behind me with a calm that didn't belong to me. Outside, the air hit my face like cold water. My body shook, but my mind was strangely clear, focused. I'd seen enough. I didn't need his explanations anymore. I had proof, and proof was power. As I drove away, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Eyes sharp, lips pressed tight, no tears. Something had shifted inside me for good. Love had officially died, but something stronger had taken its place. Something patient, something calculating. And when Michael came home that night, smiling and unsuspecting, I already knew. It was time for my act to begin. That night, I didn't flinch when I heard his car pull into the driveway. The headlights washed over the living room window like stage lights, and I sat there waiting, calm, composed, rehearsed. The key turned in the door, and there he was, flowers in hand, smiling as if nothing in the world had changed. I watched him walk toward me, his confidence almost admirable in its stupidity. Then his eyes landed on the table, and on the small silver key lying in the center. He froze. I didn't move. The silence stretched until it almost hummed. "Where did you get that?" he asked finally, voice tight. I looked up, my tone quiet but sharp enough to cut through the room. "From your other life." I watched the color drain from his face as realization took root. He opened his mouth, scrambling for something, anything, to say. "Laura," he started, "listen, it's not what you think." I stood, meeting his eyes. "Oh, it's exactly what I think," I said, my voice low but steady. "You got yourself a secret apartment, and a second woman." He stepped forward, palms raised in a pathetic attempt at control. "I needed space," he said, desperate now. "We've been distant. I didn't want to hurt you." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so expected. That's what men like him do. Rewrite betrayal as need. "You needed space?" I repeated, my tone almost amused. "So you moved out emotionally first, and physically second?" He looked away, jaw tightening, the guilt twisting him in real time. I circled the table slowly, like someone examining a stranger. Every memory between us suddenly felt foreign, every promise hollow. I'd spent years protecting what I thought was sacred, while he was busy furnishing his sin. He reached out, his voice softening, that old manipulative charm bleeding through. "Laura, please, you don't understand what it's been like. You've been so distant lately. I didn't know how to reach you." I stopped him with a single look. Calm, deliberate, final. "You mean I stopped worshipping you," I said. "And when the attention faded, you went shopping for a new audience." The sting of my words hit him, and for a moment, he had no defense left. There it was. The silence I'd been craving. The moment when truth fills every corner of a room, suffocating lies. I felt strangely free, like I'd stepped outside of my own life and was watching the final act of a play I'd once starred in. I could have screamed, cried, thrown things, but I didn't. He didn't deserve my chaos. What he deserved was something quieter, sharper, the kind of punishment that doesn't end when the argument does. I looked him in the eye, every word measured. "I thought about making a scene," I said softly. "About yelling, breaking things, asking you why. But then I realized I don't owe you my pain, just your consequences." His lips parted, but nothing came out. He knew I meant it. I picked up the apartment key from the table, twirled it once between my fingers, then set it back down like evidence in a trial. He tried again, voice trembling now. "Laura, please, can we talk about this?" I tilted my head, studying the man who once swore he'd never hurt me. "Oh, we'll talk," I said, stepping past him. "Just not tonight. You've already said enough without meaning to." The smell of his cologne suddenly made me sick. I opened the window, letting the cold night air flood in. He stood there, lost, holding those useless flowers. The irony almost poetic. I didn't tell him what I'd seen, or what I was planning next. That was mine to keep. Let him think the silence meant forgiveness. Let him sleep next to the storm he couldn't see coming, because when I'd finally strike, he'd never see it coming. The next few weeks, I lived like a ghost with purpose. I smiled when I had to, spoke when spoken to, and let him believe I'd moved past it. But every morning, while he showered or left for work, I was already 3 steps ahead. I copied files, took photos, printed statements. Every secret he'd hidden from me was now tucked neatly in a folder labeled Freedom. Funny how betrayal can make you efficient. My silence became my weapon. The quieter I got, the closer he came to losing everything. I met with a lawyer on a Tuesday afternoon, my voice steady, my evidence ironclad. "He's been misusing company money," I said, sliding over the documents. "He's been paying rent for a private apartment with it." The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "You have proof?" I nodded. Proof was all I had now. Proof and patience. "Once the divorce papers are filed," I continued, "I want this information to reach his company, anonymously." The lawyer leaned back, impressed. "That's brutal," he said quietly, "but effective." I smiled, not out of pride, but peace. "He built 2 lives," I told him. "I'm just demolishing both." Saying it out loud didn't feel cruel. It felt clean, like justice, dressed in silk gloves. When I left the office, I could almost taste freedom on the wind. It was the same city, the same streets, but everything looked different now, sharper, clearer, as if I'd finally stepped out of his shadow. Back home, I played the part of the forgiving wife a little longer. I cooked dinner, folded laundry, even laughed at his jokes, all while moving quietly through my checklist. I'd already opened my own account, transferred what I needed, and packed away the things that truly belonged to me. Every night while he slept peacefully beside me, I was planning my escape with the precision of someone who'd been underestimated for far too long. There was a strange kind of satisfaction in it. Not rage, not vengeance for vengeance's sake, but something deeper. Control. After years of being the one waiting, worrying, wondering, I was finally the one orchestrating. And he had no idea. I even thanked Tom the next time we saw him, smiling as if I'd forgiven his drunken slip. "You were right," I said lightly. "Not every woman's husband gets them a second home." He laughed awkwardly, and I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then the day came. The papers were filed, the report was sent, and the silence that followed was glorious. Within 48 hours, Michael's world began to crumble. His boss called. His accounts froze. The company launched an investigation. He came home pale, trembling, muttering about misunderstandings. I offered him tea. sympathy. Nothing more. Inside, I was already gone. When the envelope arrived, his official suspension letter, I placed it on the counter beside a neatly stacked pile of divorce papers. He found them that night. "Laura," he said, voice shaking, "please don't do this." "I'll fix it." I turned, calm as the sea after a storm. "You wanted your own place, Michael," I said softly. "Now you can live there, alone." His mouth opened, but there were no words left to twist. Lies had finally run out of breath. He tried calling me for days after that. I didn't answer. There's no point arguing with someone who only listens to themselves. The last time he tried, his voice cracked on the voicemail. "I lost everything," he said. "I'm sorry." I deleted it without hesitation. It wasn't cruelty. It was closure. The kind that doesn't need witnesses. And as I stood in my nearly empty home, surrounded by half-packed boxes and a silence that finally felt safe, I realized something. I wasn't the broken one. He was. My revenge wasn't about destruction anymore. It was about reclamation. Of power. Of peace. Of me. 6 months later, I turned the key in a new door. My door. The apartment smelled faintly of fresh paint and lavender, sunlight pouring across the hardwood floor like a silent blessing. It was smaller than the house Michael and I once shared, but it felt bigger in all the ways that mattered. Every corner was mine. Every choice, every color, every imperfection. I'd chosen it that way. To start from scratch. To build something honest from the wreckage. I stood in the middle of the living room, glass of wine in hand, and listened to the quiet. Not the heavy, suffocating silence I'd lived with before. This was peace, soft and alive. The kind that hums beneath your skin. I ran my fingers over the kitchen counter, remembering how I used to cook dinner for a man who barely noticed I was there. Now I cooked for myself, and somehow it tasted better. When my best friend dropped by that evening, her eyes widened. "It's beautiful, Laura. A fresh start?" she asked, smiling. I laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from deep in your chest, unforced. "Yes," I said. "Only one key this time. And it's mine." We toasted to that, the clink of glasses echoing like punctuation at the end of a long, brutal sentence. Later, after she left, I stepped out onto the balcony. The city buzzed below, a mix of voices, car horns, and the rhythm of lives continuing. I took a slow sip of wine, letting the evening air brush against my skin. There was a time I'd have felt lonely here, surrounded by quiet and walls that didn't know my history. But now, it felt like freedom, like breathing without permission. My phone buzzed on the counter inside. I didn't need to check to know who it was. Michael's name glowed faintly across the screen, followed by the words, "I lost everything. I'm sorry." I stared at it for a moment, not with anger, not even with satisfaction, just distance. Then I deleted it. No hesitation, no second thought. It was as if erasing him from my phone was the final step in erasing him from my life. I set the phone face down, took another sip of wine, and looked out at the skyline. Somewhere, he was sitting in that apartment he'd built for his lies, surrounded by the ghosts of choices he couldn't undo. And somewhere else, I was finally alive again, far from the woman who used to wait for him to come home. Inside, soft music played. Something calm, something new. I curled up on the couch, the night pressing gently against the windows, and for the first time in years, I didn't need anyone's voice but my own. The fear, the anger, the hurt, they were gone. What remained was clarity. I had walked through fire, and somehow I'd come out cleaner, stronger. I thought back to that night at Tom's house, the laughter, the clinking glasses, the careless confession that shattered everything. How strange that the moment meant to humiliate me had become the spark that rebuilt my life. Every lie he told had pushed me closer to my truth. Every betrayal had been a quiet invitation to begin again. As the city lights flickered in the distance, I whispered to myself, smiling. He built his secret apartment to hide a lie. I raised my glass, the wine catching the light. I built mine to live my truth.